Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I'm talking to y'all. All right. It's a beautiful day today. Praise Jesus. All right. Just a few announcements before we sing today. So Brittany had sort of an adopted grandmother issue, and so she brought, and the lady, they just have all these clothes. Some of them have never been worn before. So that room is over there is full of clothes. So make sure you take a look before you leave today. You might see something you like, and Brittany brought them over for you to look at. It's a lot. And then I put the Easter sign up for the Easter luncheon. That's on Wednesday the 27th. We want you to bring your favorite Easter dish, favorite Easter recipe on that day. Today's Jean Snyder's last day with us before she leaves to go away. So, Jean, we're glad you'd be with us, Jean. And Seniors by the Sea, the annual thing at the college, MACU, is usually in the summer, but they've moved it to April 16th this year. It's Tuesday, April 16th. So you can sign up for that online or through me. All right, you're ready to sing? Rock of Ages. Rock of Ages, fled for me. Let me hide myself in thee. Let the water and the blood from the wounded side which flowed be a sin double pure. Save from wrath and make me pure. Nothing and I bring, simply to the cross I cling. Naked come to thee for dress, helpless look to thee for grace. Bow I to the fountain fly, watch me Savior, or I die. While I draw this fleeting breath, with my body shall close in death. When I soar to worlds unknown, see beyond my judgment throne. Rock of Ages, fled for me. Let me hide myself in
Steve, I have a question about the second stanza
No,
there.
I can't answer it.
Naked come to thee. I don't remember that in there. You had it there.
Yeah, I made those words up.
I don't remember properly. Okay.
It's there, I promise. I promise. Thanks, Courtney.
Thank you, Courtney.
I will, thank you so much.
All right. If you ever want to get to Courtney's good side, she is from Wisconsin, so she loves cheese curds. Cheese curds. All right. So the question from last week, for those that were here, was about one of the children was Marie Antoinette. Well, that was the answer. That wasn't the answer, but we found out that one of her 15 children was Marie Antoinette. So today's question has to do with her. Okay. Marie Antoinette's daughter, Marie Therese, married her cousin, Louis Antoine, Duke of Angoulême. That took 3 years of French. He became King Louis the 19th of France in 1830. The question is, you have to raise your hand and you get one answer. His reign lasted for how long? How long did his reign last? And you're never going to get it, so I'm going to give you the closest person that's going to get it because it's random. Yes, ma'am.
30 days.
Okay. Laura?
2 years.
2 years, 30 days. Debbie?
6 months.
6 months. All right, Linda?
45 years.
45 years. Russell?
19 days.
19 days. Angelique?
10 years.
10 years. Karen?
15 years.
15 years. Ed?
7 days.
7 days.
Oh, boy.
Okay. Carol?
1 year.
1 year. All right, Donna?
30 days.
30 days. I'm going to give it to Ed because it lasted for 20 minutes. 20 minutes. And this is a brand new cup. It's from Planning Center. We do a lot of our service with this. So this is yours today. We got a new cup and water.
Wow, he overdid himself, didn't he?
We got paid.
It doesn't say why. It doesn't say why. He just said it lasted 20 minutes. That wasn't the question. The question was how long it lasts. That's next week, Linda. Okay. All right. Donna, you ready?
Yeah.
I'm going to research it and give you the answer at the end of church today.
I want to thank you for taking my place when I'm not here.
Ooh, they don't like that, so. That's right.
He is not you.
That's true.
Well, he did a good job. I heard
He
him.
does his best.
These are little short jokes, okay?
We would be lost without Steve.
Yeah.
I'm always lost
Okay. It's been 6 months since I joined the gym, and I still have no progress. So I'm going there in person tomorrow to see what the problem is. My kids wanted to know what it was like for me growing up. So I took their cell phone, shut off the internet, gave them a popsicle, and told them to go outside until the street lights came on.
There you go.
Yeah.
These are all little Yes. Okay. Dear God, you gave me childhood, then you took it away. You gave me youth, once again, you took it away. You gave me a wife, it's been years now, just reminding you. Okay. I've told this joke before, but I'm gonna. A pastor went to the dentist for a set of false teeth. The first Sunday after he got his teeth, he preached for only 8 minutes. The second Sunday, he talked for only 10 minutes. The following Sunday, he talked for 2 hours and 48 minutes. The congregation had to mob him to get him down from the pulpit, and they asked him what happened. The pastor explained the first Sunday his gums hurt so bad he couldn't talk for more than 8 minutes. The second Sunday, his gums hurt too much to talk for more than 10 minutes. But on the third Sunday, by mistake, he put his wife's teeth in and he couldn't shut up.
Only a lady could tell that joke.
Okay, and then a little bit of inspiration. Someday we'll forget the hurt, the reason we cried, and who caused us pain. We will finally realize that the secret of being free is not revenge, but letting things unfold in their own way and in their own time. After all, what matters is not the first, but the last chapter of our life, which shows how well we ran the race. So smile, laugh, forgive, believe, and love all over again.
Let's give Donna a round of applause. She's done such a good job putting everything together, the jokes and the inspiration, so we appreciate you, Donna.
Good morning. I'm a rather awkward individual, and both when I was preaching and teaching, I find the first initial minute of coming from my seat up here is the most awkward. But maybe it's the teeth thing, because once I start doing this, I feel okay.
Take a deep breath.
Yeah. Okay, so we're in Matthew 5. And we are starting on 25. What we're looking into here is a continuation kind of last week. Last week was kind of talking about anger and how it just doesn't permeate an anger to you, but to kind of how you feel in general. This one is going to cover, again, relationships with a person that you might be angry with, but specifically someone who's angry with you. This is talking about lawsuits. Now, I've never been in a lawsuit, but I absolutely love me some Judge Judy. I watch every episode that they put on YouTube, and it's like little clips, and they break it up and everything to get the best monetization, you know. But I love it. And I love her very down-to-earth, quick-wit, smart, sharp, get to the point. I love it. I eat it up. I wish that every judge was like that, you know. But I've never been personally involved in a lawsuit. I don't ever think you were either that I can recall at all, okay? I've only been in a court about 3 times, so I only see on TV what really happens and kind of have a limited understanding of it. But I can imagine that if someone is suing you for whatever reason that they are, that you might not be too happy with them, particularly because you don't feel the same way about the situation that they do, okay? So there's a word that's going to be used here that's translated a little funny in different translations that I kind of want to clarify when we go through this. But Joe, since you were asking about earlier, can you read verse 25 and 26?
Okay. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still with him on the way, or he may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. I'll tell you the truth, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny.
Okay, there's a word there that talks about the other person. What's the word that's used in different translations? You had, what was yours? Adversary?
Adversary.
Enemy? What else does anyone have? Anything else?
What do you got?
Adversary? Enemy? The word is like opponent, okay? Think of a ring and you're boxing, and over here's this one and here's this one. That doesn't mean that this person is an evil adversary. This is an adversary like Satan adversary, where the word literally means adversary. This is someone who is just across from you in a fight, okay? This individual doesn't necessarily have to be the one that is doing the wrong in the situation. It could be you, and that's why they're suing you, or it could be that they're the one who's done wrong, but they still are trying to sue you to get something. That happens a lot sometimes, I've noticed on Judge Judy. But what it's talking about here is kind of getting over your anger. Has anyone ever been in a lawsuit kind of like that? Where there's a situation where they're suing you?
I've been in a lawsuit where the person, they weren't suing me, but they had false testimony.
False testimony?
It was a child that had false testimony against me,
Oh,
so.
oh.
And the good thing for cameras in the school proved my innocence.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
Was it a civil lawsuit or a criminal?
I don't know, civil.
Okay. Well, yeah, this one's specifically speaking about civil, like monetary, not like putting you in jail kind of thing. What we're talking about here is when you're going to court, okay, think about what we talked about with anger. If you're seeing this person not just as the opponent on the other side, like in a debate, I like to get into arguments a lot, but I don't see them as this. I see them as this. The other person who I disagree with, I see as my mental combatant. And you go at it with your facts and figures, just like that. And they're my opponent. They're not my enemy. They're not my adversary. They're just my opponent. They're on the other side. They oppose, opponent, they oppose my opinion. And at the end of the day, I'm sorry?
You like to debate.
I love it, yes. You know what it does? Because in my opinion, debate makes you dig really deep. Makes you really challenge what you believe. Makes you really think about what they're saying and what you're saying. And so I believe people who debate can tend to be open-minded. Not people who just yell their opinion, but people who take it in and say, okay, well, here's my point. Let's go. The fencing match, like a boxing match, you're going back and forth. In this situation here, you don't have to be hateful towards them. They don't have to be hateful towards you. What is being expressed here, though? Again, thinking of anger. You're going to court. They have a lawsuit. What are we talking about?
I want to say settle matters quickly, maybe? No.
How? Opinions? How?
He doesn't want you to go to court, he wants you to have it settled before you go into court, so that, because you might not get the outcome that you want.
Right. Now think about the Beatitudes. In fact, go back, cheat sheet time, go back to the Beatitudes. What kind of characteristics or personality traits would be good to have in the Beatitudes to be able to settle these matters before you get to court? Meekness.
Humble.
What's another peacemaker?
Humility. Peacemaker. Meekness, being a peacemaker. What else?
I would say merciful.
Merciful. How about hungry and thirsting for what's right? If you're in a lawsuit, does that always mean that someone's right? Right. Sometimes it's, I don't think I should pay that amount. You have this bill from the garage guy because I dented your door that's $14,000. You drive a jalopy that costs you $500 from your brother down the street. Okay, that's not happening, okay? So no one's really right in this situation. There's no real correct outcome. But I want to be righteous. So I look at this and I say, listen, buddy, maybe there's something we can work out before we go. Because maybe that judge ends up being his father. And I'm going to be in big trouble and I don't want to go to debtor's prison. And this person's upset. And instead, I'm merciful. I'm meek. I want to be a peacemaker. I'm not used to Ed being over there. I want to be a peacemaker. So I'm talking to this person. Maybe a little bit of mental sparring, but kind of gauging who they are. And not just ripping them to pieces. Not throwing them in the hell of my mind because I'm angry.
There's a scripture in the Bible that turn, I'll do it and which, not using wrath, so you may turn away. I'll do it in gentleness.
A
so
gentle
it'll
word
turn
turns
wrath.
away wrath. Instead,
That's true.
yeah, instead of getting so worked up about a thing, engage, talk. In fact, Paul talks a lot about with brothers and sisters in the body shouldn't even go to court together. And yet I watch Judge Judy and how many people are like, I'm a Christian, I ain't lying. Well, I go to church every day and I ain't lying. And somebody's lying, okay? We're not supposed to be like that. If you embody those attributes that are in the Beatitudes, and I know that you have a lot of them, you just have to let them come out. And then when a situation like this happens, you're not doing this, you're more like this. You're more like this. Reach out, take my hand. Let's work this out. That's the kind of people we should be. Not just the kind of angry people who are beating down doors and demanding every penny, but we want to be the kind of people that can just be gentle, meek, soft, and work it out. In fact, there's my preacher that was in Ohio, he had this saying. He said, let the chips, or do the right thing for the right reason. Let the chips fall where they may, and let God pick up the pieces. Even if you do everything you can before you go to court or in whatever situation it be, and it just doesn't work out, and you're doing the right thing for the right reason, and things go against you, are you in the right? You're trying to do the right thing for the right reason, and it doesn't go your way. Are you in the right?
Probably in God's eyes you are.
God's eyes. Whose eyes does it matter?
That's the only one.
It's the only one. If you're doing what's right and things are going to turn against you, like we know things will for Christians, is it not right to just do what's right before God? And things still may go against you. But in situations like this with humanity, you can't be so worked up. And I don't mean this in some metaphorical sense. I'm literally talking, if you go to Food Line today and someone dents your door, and you have a choice, you can flip out and go, whoa! Or, oh, it was a little kid. He got out, it's a dent. It's a car, it's a dent. What do you do? Who cares? Are you going to rip that little kid apart So that in his mind, all he thinks about is that nice Christian lady with the Bible who threw the Bible across the seat and got all mad because there's a dent in her door, and that's what he thinks the rest of his life? Or that you were an example to that individual and said, it's just a door. It's no big deal. Okay? There are legal things. If someone hits you and there's damage, that's one thing. But where are you spiritually in that moment? We're not just supposed to live our lives spiritually in those moments that everything's nice and happy. It's a nice, beautiful day outside. That's wonderful. But God wants to know what we're going to do in the rain, in the hail, and the snow. Not just when it's beautiful out. In our souls. Okay? Anyone else have anything for that? So now we go into an interesting one. It's going to get very interesting here. You don't have to say if you don't want to. How many of you have had a partner, specifically a spouse, cheat on you? It's terrible, isn't it? It's horrible. It makes you feel like nothing. It's happened to me. It's not fun. Not me with my spouse. Not my wife. No, this is before all that. Sorry, I did not mean to insinuate that at all. No. Someone before my wife. You don't have any sort of gratification from them anymore, especially mentally, because now there's always kind of that seed of doubt. Okay? Thinking about these human relations, specifically physical human relations, because this is where Christ is going with this, I want someone to read from 27 through 30.
You have heard that the law of Moses says, do not commit adultery. But I say, anyone who even looks at a woman with lust in his eye has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So if your eye, even if it is your good eye, causes you to lust, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your hand, even if it is your stronger hand, causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell.
First question. Is Jesus being literal or metaphorical when he talks about plucking out your eye and cutting off your
I'm
hand?
going to say metaphor.
Metaphorical? Okay. Do you think then he's talking about hell as being literal or metaphorical?
No, that's real.
So Jesus is saying a metaphorical thing about a literal thing? What if I said that Jesus is being literal here? How would that make you feel? Do you think that God would rather you pluck out your eye so you don't sin with your eye so that you can go in heaven? Or that you would think it's just metaphorical, you're not pulling out your eye, but you still continue to sin with it, you go to hell? Which one do you think God
I
desires?
want to say in a situation that is more emphasizing the seriousness of drifting away by looking at a woman lustfully, and the seriousness of it, because one step could lead to another, to another, to another. Lust of the eyes,
Right.
lust of the flesh.
But why does he start by taking such a drastic measure?
The seriousness.
Seriousness?
Yeah, what you're doing.
So then do you think that that's metaphorical or literal? Jesus mentions a rich man being to go through the eye of the needle. Is he speaking literally or metaphorically? Literally. Why would he be speaking metaphorically about a thing that's supposed to be impossible? Because then his disciples say, well, then who can get into heaven? He's speaking literally. It's easier for a rich man to literally go through the eye of the needle. That's what he's saying. Yes, Ed?
He wasn't speaking about the gate, the eye of the
No, that is something that people have raised. There was no eye of the needle gate. People have raised that idea to lessen what Jesus says. Christians throughout history have tried to take what Jesus says and say, oh, it's metaphorical. Oh, it's not literal. It's better for someone to have a millstone hung around their neck and thrown into the bottom of the sea than any one of these little ones to be led astray. Is that literal or metaphorical? He's meaning this literally. It's better that they go to heaven And this person drowned because they led them astray. Jesus speaks in parables because we can't understand the literalness of God, the literalness of heaven, how it operates. So he's giving us metaphors that illustrate literal things. But when it comes to things that are actual that can happen, Jesus speaks literally. We can't forget that. Christians throughout history have taken something like this and diminished it and diminished it and diminished it. Jesus is just kind of making it a serious thing. Why would Jesus make something that's actually that important, that's so serious that we say it's really serious, but then he's just speaking metaphorically? Oh, that was a great sermon. That's what it becomes. That was a great, did you hear what he said about the eye and the hand? Wow, that's got to be an important thing. Man, Shirley from Applebee's, she sure gets my anger going.
Oh my goodness.
But I'm not really going to pluck out my eye. Yes! Jesus literally wants you to stop sinning. If your phone causes you to sin because you can't stop gossiping on Facebook, trash your phone and go back to what it was like in 1990. Leave this. Let it go. If you have a friend that you talk to that constantly gossips or slanders people, and then that gets you to gossip and slander, or someone who's angry and riles you up against other people, and then you start getting riled up, cut them out of your life. He doesn't mean cut them up. Just cut them out of your life. Literally. Not metaphorically. These things are literal for literal reasons. He doesn't want you to sin. God says, be holy as I am holy. That doesn't mean take something that's so grave and so serious and lessen it to nothing but a good sermon. That's not Jesus' way. With that in mind, take that, go back to what he says about lust. First, what is lust? What is lust? What does it mean to you?
Wanting something you can't have.
That's really great. Wanting something you can't have. Is it specifically referring to people, physical desires? Like a man for a woman or a woman for a man?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
A lot of things.
What are some things we can lust after?
Money.
Money,
Cars.
cars, houses. What'd you say?
Power.
Power. Ooh, that's a good one. Speaking of the church, that's one of the things that they lusted after was power. The word there is translated more often in the New Testament as desire. And it's not always a bad thing. Those who lust after God. It uses the word those who desire God. Those who desire the greater spiritual gifts. Those who lust after them. That's not negative. That's a good thing. Now here, it's talking about a man specifically, though it can be applied to women, but a man that lusts after a woman has already committed adultery with her in his heart. What is this talking about?
Showing the seriousness of the sin.
But when it talks about this lust, he's already committed adultery. What is this lust? What is it?
What you think in your mind, it's in your heart.
Desire.
Obsession.
Obsession. When we talk about desire, if I see a painting that's beautiful, am I looking at that painting going, wow, I love the details. That's so wonderful. Look at the way they paint it. Oh, that's great. This is just astronaut. Oh my gosh, I love this painting. I want to put it in my house. Is there anything wrong with that?
No.
You're lusting after the painting, right? But there's no evil. There's no sin. Unless it goes to the trail of I have to have that painting.
And you steal it.
And you steal it. Thinking of that when we talk about lust. We've talked about when you see something beautiful. Is there any lust when a man or woman looks upon the form of the opposite sex or the same sex in some situations? When they look upon that body and they say, that's a beautiful thing. That is a beautiful thing. Is that sinful?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Ed,
Would be actionable,
I'm sorry?
would be actionable.
Right. Is something, well, when we talk about actionable, that's not actionable in a court. God knows our hearts. Now, if we see something, I joke with my wife all the time. She's like Bradley Cooper and Chris Hemsworth, and she was watching the Oscars the other night, and every time she looks at him, she goes, ooh, and I go, don't you just want that baby, you know, and she's, oh, whatever. It's a joke, because she doesn't lust after them. She doesn't derive pleasure from constantly thinking about them. She doesn't chase after them to obtain them. She really can't, right? Yet we have taken lust and kind of made it something simple, that if you look upon a woman and, oh, if you desire that shape at all, then it's lust. That's not what Jesus is talking about. Did you have something?
Yeah, I just, I thinking about all this, it's all right to think a man is handsome.
Sure.
Or a woman is pretty, I don't, there's nothing wrong in that.
Nothing wrong in that.
I see.
When he talks about adultery then, what is adultery? What is it?
If you act upon it is what makes it the sin. If you want somebody to the point where you go after them, and you shouldn't have them, like I said, it's something you shouldn't have.
Let's when we look at adultery, essentially what is adultery?
The sexual act.
A sexual act when?
Outside of marriage.
Outside of marriage.
So with an individual outside of your two-couple parent. Okay. Now, that is a what? What kind of act is it?
Physical.
Physical. It's a physical act. Now remember, here's Jesus. He's taking that and he's putting it into the emotional, the mental. That's where we go. He then goes into, it's not just looking at something going, man, that's a beautiful thing. That's a really pretty thing. Oh, that's a really handsome dude. I met a guy when I was, sorry for the aside, I met a guy when I was working at childcare. He was an Indian fellow whose kid is my favorite kid I've ever been with in childcare. He's a great 4-year-old little kid, a wonderful kid. And his mom would come in and pick him up all the time, and one day I met his dad. This dude walks in like a half-breasted, because he's Indian, with like a loose tie, and he's got immaculate hair. And I looked at that guy, I was like, man, that's the handsomest dude I have ever seen. That's not lust. That's an identification that my Creator decided that the DNA and the molecules and chemicals all work together to create that individual.
Acknowledgement.
Right. There is no sin in that thing. When does sin come in? When does the lust occur? Obsession. When you can't or don't have the thing and you desire that specific thing, not, my brother's dating and I like a girlfriend. That's not lust. That's not coveting. That's a desire to go get my own girlfriend. It's when my mom's RAV4 looks so nice that I want that RAV4. I don't want a RAV4, I want that one. And not the specific make and model, but that one. That is when you commit the adultery in your heart. Because what happens? The marriage between you and the other, you start to put up walls. People talk about, typically women will have conversations extensively with men, and they are emotionally separating themselves from their husband. Men, being very physical, tend to be more ocular. We'll see something and desire it. So then what are we not doing with our wife? Because it's not as desirable. This is where that lust is. It's not a visual something that is then desirable, but it's something that you covet, you want. Think about Eve in the garden, desirable for food. It's not just, oh, that looks good to eat. It's, I want that food. I want that one. That's what lust is. Because then, as Christ says, it's going to start breaking down your relationship. That's the start. And once that starts, you've committed adultery in your heart already. You can just forget this relationship. You've committed adultery in your heart. Does God care more about the physical act or the mental heart act? Why?
Because it's something that doesn't belong to you.
Something doesn't belong to you? Well, why does he emphasize the heart instead of, and talk about actionable, okay? Is it actionable when you're not physical? Well, no, because you can't go into court and say, oh, they committed adultery, I can stone them. No, because you don't really know. Who knows? God does.
God wants your heart.
He wants your
The
heart.
He wants that to be the only thing in your heart.
Does Jesus care more that your flesh is sinless or your heart is sinless?
Well, he says, as a man thinketh, so is he in his heart. So,
Right. God cares more about where everything starts. For the Greeks and a lot of Eastern cultures, it was here, the gut. Okay, that's where all your will and everything came from. Okay, that's where all the bodily organs were, so they thought everything was down here. All right, we say the mind up here, where the heart, is just a metaphor for it. But here, it starts with the mind interpreting something. Now, when Jesus talks about removing your eye, why does he then go to the physical to affect the mental, the spiritual? Why does he start with this? If I had no eyes, could I lust visually? It would be impossible. And therefore, it would be impossible to sin against God in a mental and a heart way in that department. That is why Jesus talks about removing things physically from your body. Because that is the start of something that then infects all of this. Joe?
Let me tie something together here. James chapter 1, verses 12 through 14, it says, "Blessed is the man who perseveres under trial, because when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. But when he is tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when by his own evil desires he is dragged away and enticed. And then after, when desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death, which ties into what you're saying.
Did Jesus ever get tempted with lust?
I don't think so, because I don't think Jesus could be tempted, right? Well, no. Wait. He was, the devil tempted him.
Jesus was human. He had the ability to be tempted.
What was Jesus specifically human? He was specifically what? A male.
The
And
Bible
what do
says
males
we were
like?
tempted by every sin that we were tempted by. But
I fully believe that.
yeah.
The only way that Jesus could become the perfect sanctification, the perfect sacrifice for us in our sin, is to be tempted with such sin. Because look at what happens with him and Satan. Jesus may never have longed for food during his journeys. Okay, he could just create it, right? He does. Feeding the 5,000, feeding the 4,000. He manifests these things from something, but he still manifests it. Here he is actually hungry, literally, physically, not metaphorically, hungry, and Satan literally tempts him with doing a literal thing. Jesus can do it. He's tempted to do this. I don't see Jesus not pondering that thought. I don't see Jesus going, oh no, Satan. Man does not live by bread alone, but every word that comes from the mouth of God. I don't see Jesus doing that. You know why? Because when you look in other parts, he's very man. Very man. He walks in the temple, his dad's house, and he is enraged with a holy wrath. And he doesn't just yell at people, he makes a whip with cords and cables and starts lashing people to get out of his father's house. That's a very male thing to do. It's not something I would do, but I'm not Jesus and God is my literal father, okay? Jesus was male. Jesus was tempted. These thoughts may have gone through his mind. Differences, like I've talked about before. He didn't catch them and then dwell on them because he knows that it is wrong. When Jesus talks about these things, he goes further from the law. You shall not commit adultery. Jesus says it's not just about the physical act, people. It starts so much more before that. In fact, if you look at the 10 Commandments, what's number 10? What's the 10th one? It actually encapsulates a lot of the ones before it.
Covet, thou shalt not covet.
You shall not covet. Well, if you don't covet, then you won't commit adultery. Then you won't steal. You most likely won't give false testimony because you're usually getting something out of that. Okay? You won't have false gods. All right? You won't make graven images to bow down to them. All these things get encapsulated in that little command. You shall not covet. Sometimes we don't think about that. But Jesus is tempted with all of these things. And he lays them out saying, hey, it starts with something physical and then it goes up here. You have to let it go before it infects this.
I got a commentary on that. It says, temptation comes from evil desires inside us, not from God. It begins with an evil thought and becomes sin when we dwell, what you were saying, dwell on the thought and allow it to become an action, like a snowball rolling downhill. Sin grows more destructive the more we let it have its way. The best time to stop a temptation is before it gets too strong or moving too fast to control.
Right. Hence, when Jesus talks about the physical, getting rid of it to not sin spiritually, he's meaning it literally, quite literally. Because God, again, would rather you go into eternal life maimed or disfigured, as some translations say, than to be a whole body getting cast into hell. Okay. Any more thoughts on that section?
He wants to change your behavior.
How does behavior change?
By doing something that dramatic, like plucking out your own eye, he's saying, well, maybe that'll change his behavior. You know? It's human nature to belittle what we have to go through. And he's saying it's this important. You better, if you're going to pluck out your eye, that better change your behavior.
Did you know in the Code of Hammurabi, that's where it talks about a lot of the different countries. You've heard about thieves getting their hands cut off. That's where it comes from, the Code of Hammurabi, of the punishment for various evils committed, okay? The reason that it's done there, even in the Old Testament, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, that one specifically, what's interesting is you could put it into the abortion debate where two gentlemen are fighting, right? And I shove Steve. And Steve bumps into a pregnant woman, right? Steve didn't do anything wrong. I did, I pushed it. And all of a sudden, this pregnant woman gives birth later on, and there's an eye missing or something wrong with his teeth. That's where the eye for the eye, tooth for tooth comes from, one of the examples. And then that would be done to me, the missing of the eye, the tooth, because I've committed that to someone else. Jesus is now using this against us. We don't want to sin against us, okay? What, the humming?
Yeah. Oh.
Can someone go from 31 and 32?
It has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for marital unfaithfulness, causes her to become an adulteress. And anyone who marries the divorced woman commits adultery.
Who in here has been divorced? Who in here may not have ever been divorced, but has married someone who was divorced?
That too. I hate to admit it.
When Jesus, yeah, it's, when Jesus talks about this, how serious, because even thinking about the previous passage, how serious does God take marriage? Seriously. What is one part of marriage that is supposed to be sacrosanct, holy and pure among the marital couple?
The marriage bed.
Marital bed, sex. I think it was a week ago or 2 weeks ago, I said, VDs would disappear if everyone just married one person once and then that was it. And if you got divorced, you just stayed divorced, and okay, that it would just disappear in the whole world almost overnight, okay? Because sexual sin is a very big sin. God takes marriage so seriously because it is an illustration of something else, of the church. Well, before that, even just his people. If you're willing to take your physical partner and say, you know what, at one point I loved them, but now I see this other thing, and boy, I end up liking that soup at Applebee's, and, so I'm going to go make sure that I get to see her every weekend. If I'm going to take that and just let it be so, like I said, sacrosanct, if I'm going to take that and just let my marriage, my physical relationship with my wife, my mental and spiritual relationship with this individual, this human being, and I'm just going to throw it in the trash for this other thing that I want and I desire. How much do you think that I really care about my relationship with God? We're not talking about abuse. We're not talking about something where someone has done something evil, okay, like they've attempted murder on you. Oh, I've got to get divorced. That's one thing. We're talking about when you've drifted away from someone and just let it go. If you're drifting away from someone and you're doing everything in your power to keep them there, who's going to divorce who? Are you going to divorce, or would they be the one who divorces? I have a friend in Ohio who has been married 5 times. He had 4 marriages, and each one of them, he was in the military, in the Air Force, and each one of them, he wanted so much for the relationship to stay. But for one reason or another, they would leave him. And then he would be stuck without a spouse, a companion, and he'd go find another one. He was a young man in his 20s and early 30s. And he'd find another one, and they would just keep leaving him, not because he was doing anything wrong, but because he was in the military. He got shipped around and they didn't like it, or he was a club goer, and that's where he liked to go in the 70s. And that's where he would find his mates. Bad place to go, he realized. After his 4th marriage ended, he's like, I'm doing something wrong. Something's wrong here. So he didn't have any sex, literal intercourse, for 18 years. He didn't even date. And during that time, he grew spiritually. He grew to the point where he cared about God. He became an elder in the church. He was doing the best to raise his son, even though he'd been divorced from his mother. And everything he started to do was pointing towards God. Then one day, this is shortly after I met him, he met a woman who he had known as a child. They'd gone to the same school together, and he was a jock and she was a cheerleader, but he was just something else, and she was too pretty for him. And here they are meeting at a time and place that they wouldn't have expected, and all of a sudden they hit it off. And he starts dating her, and within just a few months, they're married. They have one of the strongest marriages I've ever seen. This is her 3rd marriage, and this is his 5th. His 5th because he was getting married for the wrong reasons, and her 3rd because of abuse. Now when you talk about that, you look at that and you say, well, wait a minute, isn't that so sinful that he's marrying her and she's marrying him? Shouldn't they have just stayed single? God prefers that. But I'll tell you what, we desire companionship. Does that mean that God can't forgive us in those situations? God forgives. Do you think that we want to seek out divorce as Christians? I would hope not. But sometimes it happens. Sometimes we sin. As Paul said, what wretched man that I am. For the things I ought not do, I do, and the things that I ought to do, I don't. And yet he does them. But if you, as with my mother, if I can use you as an example, go into a marriage thinking that this is the right thing for the right reason, and it falls apart, especially the previous one that I was akin to in that relationship, sometimes things happen. God can forgive, and we have to remember that. But we should never hold these things so lightly. We should never hold them as things that, oh, God can forgive, I can just move on. That's not how it works. You're supposed to be united forever. And if marriage is something, I know many of you are probably past the point of seeking something like that. But it still happens. Like I said, my buddy's in his late 50s when he got married. We can't always think that something that we've done is going to destroy the rest of our lives. For if we let that happen, I can point to all sorts of people in the Bible that would never continue forward. It's what heart do you have when you go into a thing? When Jesus talks about all of the things he's talking about, the anger, the divorce, adultery, when you enter into any relationship, even be it a friend, a church, if you enter into these relationships with a very light mind, thinking that they're not supposed to be so serious, they kind of are. God takes them very seriously. He gave us the ability to have relationships because he has relationships. He wants a relationship with us, and therefore he allows us to have relationships with people. He saw Adam was alone, and he goes, that's not good for man to be alone. And not just man meaning man, male, man, women as well, people. So when you look at relationships, whether they be just friendships or parental relationships or siblings, or especially your spouse, that relationship is supposed to be so important because often it reflects your relationship with God. For if you love them with everything that you have physically, you would ultimately be able to love God with everything you have spiritually.
Of course, let's consider the biggest relationship of all. We're the bride of Christ. And the same token, we can commit adultery against Jesus Christ by turning away from him and sinning and all that. Literally can commit adultery against him because we are the bride of Christ. So that's another.
Quite literally, actually.
Yeah, that's another aspect of that.
Yeah. So like I said, relationships, this is a lot what Jesus is talking about when he does the Sermon on the Mount. So when you go home, if you have a spouse, tell them you love them. Give them a hug. Like I said earlier, I'm a very awkward person. And sometimes it's weird for me. When my wife walks in the door, I don't know what to say. We've been married almost 10 years in June. And when she walks in the door, I still don't know what to say. I still don't know how to interact with her. It seems so foolish and odd to most people. But in me, it's very difficult to go, I should go give her a hug. I have to process it. That's just how I think. And sometimes I have to remember, hey, it's her. It's about her. And if I make it about her, then it's going to be easier for me to serve her when I'm making dinner and getting her things, and not be all, well, she could get it her dang self, you know. I don't want to be like that. Because when I'm like that, it's just rude. So again, your physical and human relationships, they reflect your relationship with God. Anyone have anything else? Thank you.
If you ever get into a spiritual discussion with Russell, you need prayer.
From the bottom.
Oh, yes.